Welcome to MakeItBigTraining.com. I'm Stuart Hayes.
I'm Rich Sayer.
And today we're talking about change.
And we're not talking about the coins that you find down the edge of your couch or in your pocket. We're actually talking about the ability to adapt to changing market conditions. Stu.
In fact, we're also talking about how important that is to the survival of your business in the first place.
Change, adaptation, survival. Stu, that sounds very Darwinian. Do you want to talk more about that?
Why, thank you, Richard. Well, it is in a large way a Darwinian comment, I guess. Darwin found that it wasn't the strongest of the species that survived. It wasn't the smartest. It wasn't the fastest. But it was that one who was most able to adapt to change.
Ah, the proverbial black moth. Go on then.
Well, it's the same in business. And I've certainly found this over the years, that the businesses that have evolved and changed what they've done, changed how they've done things perhaps, have been the ones that have been able to get through the various financial crises and things that happen to all of us.
In fact, change in itself is a process, isn't it, Stu? And in history, we can see that some of the biggest companies that have ever existed now cease to exist. And that happened, just like the dinosaurs, coming back to Darwin, because they didn't adapt and change to the changing market conditions. So if you think about the railway companies in America and Europe, they were the biggest, most powerful companies in the world at the time, and they saw themselves as railway companies rather than seeing themselves as transportation companies. And as a result, they didn't embrace change with the invention of the automobile and trucking and so on and so forth. Have you got any other examples?
Well, I mean, let's think about this. The history is littered with some outstanding examples of exactly this, and certainly we love to talk about them, so we'll share some with you.
Okay.
But let's think about an organisation like Kodak, for example. So here's Kodak, one of the behemoths of the world in photography, and they come out and they actually invent this outlandish product called the digital camera.
Ah, I've heard of those.
Yes. Now, the funny thing, the tragic thing from Kodak's perspective is it was the digital camera that killed them. Now, here's the puzzle. You might say, well, hang on a second. If you're talking about innovation and change and seeing things and being aware of the future and seeing what's coming towards you, don't you think that that's inconsistent? Well, the answer is no, because whilst they saw what could be, they developed a digital camera. What they didn't do was change their business. They didn't change the way they went about business by downscaling the manufacturing to compensate for the change in the business.
Got it. So it's not one thing to see the potential of change, but it's another thing to actually apply it. As I speak, I'm actually looking at a Sony logo because we're using a Sony digital video camera. And Sony is a fantastic example of adaptation and change, or the failure to capitalize on opportunity. As you're saying, it's one thing to see it, but it's another thing to actually actualize that adaptation. So Sony, if you go back to, let's say, the 80s, was valued at $130 billion, which is a lot of money today, but even a lot more money back then. And when you look at them at that time, they were the master, the king. It was Sony, the one and only. When it came to electronics goods, when it came to music, Sony Music was massive. They had acts like Michael Jackson and the Beatles and so on. They invented the MP3 player, and they had the mobile phone technology. Now, you look at those ingredients there. You've got music, cameras, mobile phones, MP3 players. A little company called Apple has certainly done a lot better with that in those ingredients, and yet Sony had all of those things, but they failed to adapt and put it together and market it when the market really wanted those products.
So let's have a think about what all that means for you as a budding entrepreneur, or the people that are watching who've got businesses or are starting businesses. The most important thing to get your head around is, how can you create something that has a culture of change, that has a culture in which you're continuously looking around in your market, looking beyond the curve of innovation, looking at the things you're doing and challenging them. What could we do differently? How could we satisfy this customer in a different way? What about the way we satisfy our customer at the moment could be changed to make the customer's experience better? And then let's start making some adjustments.
Just on the Sony example, what you've just said makes perfect sense. I mean, I remember being a kid and thinking it was the coolest thing in the world to own a Walkman. There was my cassette tape on my side with my headphones, or under the sheets at night when I was supposed to be asleep and I could listen to music. How cool were Walkmans? And we used to then have little bum bag things where you could carry a couple of cassettes around, and then it went to CDs, and then we got Walkmans with multiple CD playing capacity, and I think it sort of peaked at about 10, so you could have 10 different albums on you. And yet along comes a guy called Stephen Jobs who says, yeah, this is pretty cool, but he puts his iPod on the table and says, there's 10,000 songs in your pocket. Now that's cool. And he just killed the Sony Walkman, in fact, all Walkmans, right then and there, by changing the game and adjusting to the market changing conditions.
So let me ask you, Rich, in your own business, the concept of change is something that's a reality, right?
Yep.
So all the time the market's changing, our competitors are changing what they're doing, our customers are changing what they prefer. Technology is bringing in new advances and new ways of doing things. How do you embrace that? How do you bring it back to something that works when you've got a strategy? You're trying to say, well, here's where we're going. Here's our direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you for asking that question. I'm constantly in the state of change, and probably frustratingly so. Not just for me, but for the staff and the team here. We are constantly looking at the changes in technology and trying to bring them in. And for our business, we find it's nearly impossible to change fast enough. But because we're a small business and able to change quickly, we embrace change faster than some of our competitors, which is an advantage to us. So we're looking at technological change, things like the internet. Of course, you're changing your website all the time, you're changing social media strategies, and even the web technologies have to change. I mean, if you're doing business on the internet, then you are, to some degree, at the whim of Google, and Google are constantly changing, and therefore you have to change the way you are plugging into that machine. Secondly, we've got change in the market. So the customers' needs have just changed. I mean, go back into the 90s and the early 2000s, people used to go to the pub and see a band. That's not happening so much now. People have such an amazing array of different entertainment options. The market has just changed, so we've got to market entertainment in a different way.
So what you're saying is that we should have our strongly held beliefs of the direction we're going.
Absolutely.
But have them held loosely.
Absolutely. You've got to absolutely believe in what you're doing, but be willing to change at the drop of the hat once you've received proof or an inkling of proof that requires more research. And if you think there's a need to change, there's a good chance that there is.
Thanks, Rich.
You're welcome, Stu.
This has been makeitbigtraining.com. We would love to get your thoughts and opinions on this or other topics. Share them on the link on the bottom of this website and stay in touch.
We look forward to speaking to you again. See you later.